They said it in front of everyone. The Monday morning ops briefing. 8:02 a.m. sharp. Standing room only. Supervisors, federal liaisons, and 3 too many consultants with lanyards that looked far too expensive for anyone who actually did real work. And that's when Ethan Doyle, bright-eyed, blazer, tight, and freshly imported from some DC efficiency board, stood up in front of the entire airport operations division and said it like he was reading the weather. Effective immediately, he announced. Claire Thompson's position as Chief of Security Systems has been deemed non-essential to forward momentum. Just like that. No meeting. No warning. Not even a glance in my direction. A full career, 17 years of meticulous, federally compliant, nationally benchmarked aviation safety erased in less than a sentence. Someone dropped their coffee. Someone else shifted in their chair. A few stared straight ahead like if they blinked, it would be their name next. Me? I didn't flinch. Because what they didn't realize was that every single line of airport security code, every encrypted terminal, every clearance protocol, and every emergency override system still ran through me. Still bore my name. Still required my credentials to function. And Ethan? Ethan didn't even know where the backup servers were stored, let alone how to initiate a zone lockdown during a level 3 breach. He just wanted numbers, simplification, speed. But in aviation, speed without structure is a crash waiting to happen. So I signed the termination form, calmly, politely, asked for a printed copy. And as I walked out of that room with a smile softer than smoke, nobody noticed that the countdown had already started. I wasn't the position. I wasn't the title. I was the system. And they had just unplugged the wrong wire. My name is Claire Thompson. Most people at the Denver International Airport didn't know that. They knew the security gates worked. They knew the scanners didn't glitch. They knew the alert system never rang without reason. But they didn't know who kept it that way. That was me. For 17 years, I was the one who calibrated every security protocol, cross-referenced every clearance request, signed off on every emergency override form that nobody thought they'd ever need. Not because I liked control, though I'm not innocent of that, but because in aviation, certainty is the only kindness we can offer the people walking through those gates. I started in the early 2000s, post 9/11s, when the fear was raw, when the protocols were still written in pencil, when people needed someone who could think 10 steps ahead without blinking. They brought me in fresh out of the Federal Systems program. No fluff, no ceremony, just a laptop, a basement office, and a mandate. Make the chaos invisible. And I did. I built frameworks where there were none. I wrote code that never needed applause. I layered redundancies like lace, quietly, securely, deep under systems most people never even knew existed. I wasn't flashy. I didn't lead town halls or post team selfies on LinkedIn. I didn't care about buzzwords like agile culture or modern leadership. But when a cargo manifest didn't match the manifest key, I got the call. When a TSA agent keyed in a mismatched badge ID at 3 a.m., it was my dashboard that lit up. When the FAA pushed a new compliance directive at 11:42 on a Friday night, guess who stayed until 2:30 verifying every policy line by hand? I wasn't the face of airport operations. I was the spine. I was the woman who knew which terminal door could override a fail-locked security gate in under 3 seconds, which server would auto-wipe if more than 2 invalid admin logins were attempted, and which encryption layer controlled the National No-Fly Registry backup. Most people thought of security as metal detectors and board officers with radios. What they didn't realize was that behind those blinking lights and quiet hallways was a living, breathing ecosystem designed to function precisely, consistently, invisibly. And for nearly 2 decades, I was its architect. People like Ethan never notice us. Not until the lights go out. Not until the system stops answering. Not until the silence stops meaning safety and starts meaning something else. That's the thing about being the keeper of order. Nobody thanks you while it works. They only notice when it breaks. But by then, it's already too late. He arrived on a Wednesday. Wednesdays are quiet days at the airport. Too far from Monday chaos, too early for Friday rush. It's the kind of day where you notice things more. Like the subtle way someone walks into a space and believes they already own it. His name was Ethan Doyle. 33, maybe 35 if the light hit him wrong. He wore a slim-fit navy blazer, designer shoes, and that infuriating hybrid of a smirk and a TED Talk grin. The kind of man who probably called himself a disruptor on LinkedIn and meant it without irony. He introduced himself at the operations briefing as the strategic efficiency consultant brought in by the department to modernize legacy systems and unlock forward momentum. There were nods around the room. Of course there were. No one wants to be the person who questions momentum in a room full of decision makers. I didn't nod. I'd seen his type before. Graduate school glow, buzzword fluency, zero experience managing a real crisis. These were the people who thought risk was a spreadsheet column and compliance was a checkbox with optional flair. But Ethan wasn't here to collaborate. He was here to replace. 3 days in, he had a whiteboard full of arrows, boxes, and abbreviations no one had used before. By day 5, he'd requested internal access to all cross-department workflows for benchmarking. By the end of the first week, he was shadowing everyone under 30 and scheduling one-on-one meetings with everyone over 40. I didn't get an invite. Instead, I got a memo. A real one. Printed, bold header. Subject: Strategic Realignment. It stated that my department security systems operations was being decentralized for adaptive scaling, which, in English, meant dismantled. My direct reports were reassigned. My admin access quietly downgraded. And my name was removed from the incident escalation list I had written. When I brought it up, Ethan smiled and said, "We're building a more agile structure, Claire. You've done great work. Now it's time to evolve." Evolve. It's a beautiful word when it comes from biologists. But in the mouth of a man holding a spreadsheet like a sword, it just meant, make room or get out. He replaced my escalation protocol with an app that sent alerts to a Slack channel, as if a level 2 breach could be solved with an emoji reaction. But the worst part wasn't the buzzwords or the condescension. It was how quickly people adjusted. The younger hires nodded along, used his phrases, echoed his optimism. Some even called him a breath of fresh air. And maybe he was. But what they forgot, what Ethan never knew, was that in airport security, fresh air is a vulnerability. It means a door is open. It means something just got through. He thought I was a gatekeeper of the past. What he didn't realize is that I had become the wall itself. And once you start removing bricks, you'd better know what's on the other side. It didn't happen all at once. Of course it didn't. Ethan was too smart for that. He understood optics, understood pacing. The best way to destroy something foundational is to chip at it slowly, quietly, until even the cracks start to look normal. The first change came on a Thursday. I logged in, like I always did, at 6:45 a.m. before the floor even had lights on. Same terminal, same credentials, same rhythm. But the internal compliance dashboard, the one I designed, line by line, protocol by protocol, was gone. At first, I thought it was a glitch. Maybe an update. A redirect. I tried again. Access denied. Error code 403. Contact your system administrator. Spoiler: I was the system administrator. Or I had been. By noon, I realized I couldn't override any badge access requests. My biometric authority tag had been downgraded. And when I reached out to IT, I got a templated reply. Due to realignment of admin structures, permission hierarchies have been reassigned per Section 4C. Section 4C. The same clause I helped draft 5 years ago to prevent exactly this kind of backdoor takeover. It gets better. That afternoon, my name was quietly removed from the alert escalation tree. New email. New notification. Just gone. I only found out because a junior security officer forwarded me a copy of a level 1 breach report I never saw. The subject line read, "Urgent. Who's the new clearance holder?" I forwarded it to Ethan. No reply. Instead, I got a Slack ping from his assistant, an eager 20-something with emojis in her job title, asking if I could transfer legacy documentation to the new data hub for onboarding purposes. Legacy. That word again. Legacy sounds honorable, until it's used to bury you. Then came the reassignment. I walked into my office, except it wasn't mine anymore. Nameplate removed. Desk cleared. My files boxed up and stacked like donation bins at a charity drive. There was a new placard on the door. Systems Innovation Lead, Interim, Derek S. Derek. The guy who once asked me if TSA stood for Transportation Space Authority. They hadn't just moved me. They'd replaced me with someone who didn't even know what he didn't know. I asked Ethan for a meeting. He said he was booked solid for the next 2 weeks. But wished me continued clarity. Oh, clarity? That night, I sat in my car under the parking garage floodlight and stared at the rearview mirror like it owed me an explanation. This wasn't a layoff. This wasn't restructuring. This was erasure. And it was being done with such precision, such surgical smoothness that even HR probably believed it was compliance. But I knew better. They weren't just cutting me out. They were trying to inherit what I built, without understanding that the keys didn't come with the map. And if they wanted to play quiet, I could play quieter. It was almost poetic. After 17 years of high-security access, federal compliance oversight, and real-time crisis management, I was formally reassigned to the Supply Coordination Team. More specifically, Foundational Support Logistics, Tier 2. That's how they wrote it in the system. Sounded almost important, almost respectable, until I showed up at my new workstation and found myself staring at a storage room with a flickering light bulb and rows of dusty shelves stacked with janitorial inventory. Mop handles, latex gloves, floor wax, industrial air freshener. The label on the door read, Zone 3 Sanitation Reserve. No computer, no monitor. Just a clipboard. The task list? Reorganize, relabel, and re-inventory every item by end of day Friday. For operational clarity, Ethan said. I looked at him when he said it. He didn't flinch. Didn't smile, either. He just looked at me like a man reviewing expired software, polite disinterest paired with silent triumph. This isn't a demotion, Claire, he offered. It's realignment. Foundational roles are essential to agile transformation. Foundational. Like concrete. Like mold. Like something you build over and forget is even there. I didn't argue. I just nodded, took the clipboard, and walked away, heels echoing against linoleum that smelled like bleach and forgotten importance. By lunch, the whispers had started. People passed me in the hallway and looked away a little too quickly. A few offered thin smiles, the kind that apologize without saying a word. One intern asked if I was shadowing facilities for process evaluation. I didn't answer. That afternoon, I requested admin access to the badge clearance logs, purely procedural, part of my former role. The response? That dashboard has been migrated. You don't need access anymore. The new access holder? A 24-year-old temp who once asked if FAA clearance meant watching airplane without subtitles. It would have been laughable if it hadn't been so calculated. They weren't just removing me. They were replacing me with incompetence so shameless it became the point. To humiliate. To provoke. To let me know that even if I didn't break, they could break the meaning of what I'd spent my life building. And still, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't fight. Because this wasn't about the mop handles. This was about Ethan needing the room to echo with his own voice. He needed silence before he could speak with authority. And to do that, he had to erase mine. But what he didn't understand is that silence isn't surrender. Sometimes, silence is storage. And I was storing everything. Every shift. Every lockout. Every reroute. Every single digital footprint of what used to be mine. because they thought I was boxed up and done. What they didn't know was that I was still watching. And the janitor's closet? It just gave me the perfect view. The funny thing about working in systems security for 17 years is that you learn how to build things that don't make noise when they fall apart. Noise attracts attention. Attention breeds resistance. But silence? Silence gets into the walls before anyone notices the cracks. So I didn't storm into anyone's office. I didn't write emails in all caps. I didn't even raise my voice. I just started tying knots. First, I logged into a terminal nobody used anymore and tucked in the back hallway of the operations wing, behind the defunct fax server. I used credentials that hadn't been flagged, yet an old administrative ID tied to an obsolete but still active subnetwork that I had personally architected back in 2012. No one had decommissioned it. Of course they hadn't. They didn't even know it existed. From there, I ran a sweep across all the systems I used to control. FAA compliance logs, terminal badge syncs, no-fly override triggers, encrypted clearance workflows. 78 critical nodes. All still tied, in one way or another, to me. To my biometric signature. To my certification key. And more importantly, to Clause 11C of my contract. Clause 11C. In the event of unilateral role termination, all systems, licenses, and federal clearances administered by the employee shall be considered invalid unless transferred in writing, with consent and supervision of the incumbent authority. Guess who never got my consent? So I activated a security timer. I didn't shut anything down. No drama. No sirens. I just set a 72-hour expiration protocol, a system I'd coded years ago in case of a cyber breach or internal hijack. It was designed to protect the infrastructure from being abused by unauthorized hands. If no valid override was submitted within the time window, the system would self-revoke. Clearances would vanish. Badges would fail. FAA syncs would return red. All data flows would be tagged as non-compliant under federal review. And guess what? Only I knew how to override the failsafe. Only I ever had the key. As a final step, I exported every access credential, backup authority log, and clearance audit zip them into an encrypted drive labeled Airport Vendor Snack List 2019 and uploaded it to a private archive that existed outside the organization's detection net. Then I cleared the cache, wiped my trail, logged out. New footprints, new questions, just stillness. People think revenge is loud, that it comes with slammed doors and screaming matches. They're wrong. The best kind of revenge is systemic. It moves like a shadow. It doesn't just get even, it changes the terms of the conversation. They thought I was just another legacy employee clinging to an old title. They didn't realize I'd quietly written myself into the DNA of every system they relied on to keep planes in the sky. And now that they'd cut me out, I had no obligation to hold it together. Let them talk about momentum. Let them reorganize the supply closet. Let them smile in front of HR. Because somewhere quietly, invisibly, the countdown had already begun. It happened on a Monday. Of course it did. Mondays at an airport don't feel like a beginning, they feel like survival. Everyone's running on caffeine and protocol, trying to keep 1,000 moving pieces from colliding at 600 miles per hour. But this Monday was different. This Monday came with an Outlook invite labeled Momentum Sync, Phase 3, sent by Ethan Doyle. Marked mandatory for all supervisory staff. The location? Terminal Operations Command, Main Briefing Hall. Capacity, 78 chairs, 1 projector, and just enough tension to snap a steel cable. I arrived on time. Not early. Not late. Just exactly on time. The room was full. Middle managers. Coordinators. People I'd worked beside for over a decade. Some glanced at me and quickly looked away. Some gave a tight, guilty smile. A few didn't look at all. Ethan stood at the front, blue blazer, slim tie, tablet in hand. Polished. Confident. The kind of confidence that's only ever worn, never earned. Let's start with some candor, he said. That's how you always know someone's about to gut you in public, when they lead with candor. In the last several weeks, Ethan continued, pacing slowly, we've begun a transformational journey towards streamlining operations, reducing redundancies, and empowering adaptive teams. Buzzwords. So many buzzwords. He could have sold that speech to a Fortune 500 boardroom and still had leftovers. I sat still, hands folded, spine straight. He clicked through a few slides, graphs no one could verify, acronyms no one questioned. And then he stopped pacing. He stood directly behind me, close enough that I could hear his breath. Unfortunately, he said, voice calm, certain roles are no longer aligned with our forward momentum. Silence. Someone shifted in their seat. A paper rustled. A throat cleared in the back. Effective immediately, he announced. Claire Thompson's position has been phased out. Just like that. No conversation. No one-on-one. No dignity. Just a public execution disguised as policy. I stood up slowly. Not because I was shaking, but because my legs felt too steady for how much they wanted to move. HR was already walking toward me. Two of them. Young. Nervous. Avoiding eye contact. One carried a glossy folder like it was a communion wafer. The other looked like she wanted to vanish. I opened it. Termination page. No severance. Just legalese and a blank line. I pulled a pen from my own, bag-signed it with a single, unshaking stroke. Then I looked up at Ethan and said, I'll need a printed copy. He blinked. It's all digital, he replied. I said printed. A pause. HR hesitated. 4 minutes later, I walked out with a stapled hard copy in my hand, and the calm of a woman who knew exactly what she'd just triggered. What Ethan didn't understand, what no one in that room fully grasped, was that when I signed that form, Section 11, C of my employment contract activated. It wasn't just paperwork. It was a key, and they had just turned it. Behind my eyes, I wasn't watching an ending. I was watching a clock. I'd set myself, and it had already started ticking. It started small, the kind of glitch you'd almost ignore if you didn't know better. Monday night, 8:13 p.m. A procurement specialist named Ben tried to confirm delivery on a batch of biometric ID cards from a secure vendor. He got a bounce-back email. Request denied. Receiving entity marked inactive. He flagged it to his manager. They shrugged. Maybe a typo. Resend it in the morning. But morning didn't wait. By 6:42 a.m., Tuesday, 3 more procurement requests failed. 2 involving TSA badge reissues. 1 tied to secure clearance for tarmac vehicle operators. The error codes? Credential authority revoked. Contact certifying officer. Except there was no certifying officer anymore. At 7:05, the internal license dashboard, which had proudly glowed green for over a decade, lit up like a Christmas tree on fire. Red alerts. Missing credentials. Orphaned licenses. Expired validations. At 7:18, Renee, a junior compliance analyst barely 6 months in, walked into Ethan's office holding a printed report and shaking slightly. Sir? The FAA database just flagged us as non-compliant. Ethan didn't even look up. Just update the contact info, he said. Renee blinked. Sir, that's not how it works. Why not? Because Claire was the certifying officer. She was the only one registered with the Federal Aviation Board. No one else here has reauthorization privileges. A long pause. Then, slowly, Ethan sat up straight. Then just have someone else apply. The re-registration period takes weeks, Renee whispered. And we're already out of window. By 8:30 a.m., API calls to the FAA audit portal began failing. At 8:45, vendor syncs returned authentication errors. At 9 o'clock, the security team couldn't update a restricted badge list. At 9:12, the TSA liaison called, Your back-end systems aren't passing validation. What's going on over there? Then came the big one. At 9:25, a Level 2 alert was triggered by an inbound carrier requesting emergency clearance for rerouting due to weather. The command center attempted to issue override clearance. System response? Request denied. Signature invalid. Operations froze. Phones rang. People shouted. Every screen in the command hub screamed a different version of the same truth. You've lost authority. And still, Ethan stood in the middle of it all like he was trying to read subtitles in a foreign language he pretended to speak. He turned to his tech lead. Can we get Claire's credentials reinstated? The tech blinked. Sir, she didn't just log out. She revoked everything. Her ID was scrubbed from the National Registry at 7:13 p.m. yesterday. Well, can we override it? Only with a federal review. It could take weeks. That's when it hit him. The silence. The kind of silence that only lives in rooms where people realize too late that the foundation they thought was solid was actually borrowed. That someone they thought was replaceable was the only one keeping the lights on. And by 10 a.m., the lights were flickering. By Tuesday afternoon, it was no longer a glitch. It was a pattern, a rhythm of failure, and it was spreading faster than anyone could contain. The first wave hit Denver. A morning flight to Seattle was grounded when the gate couldn't validate the pilot's security clearance. System override failed. Backup credentials? All tied to Claire. All revoked. They rerouted through Houston until Houston called. Same issue. Same error. Authority validation unavailable. Proceeding would constitute federal breach. Then came Salt Lake, Phoenix, Chicago Midway. By 1:30 p.m., 15 airports had reported failure to verify incidents tied directly to the revoked credentials. 76 flights were delayed. 19 were grounded outright. And one inbound medical flight was forced to hold over Idaho airspace because no airport could legally clear it for an emergency landing. The FAA called. This time, it wasn't a courtesy check-in. It was a directive. Your systems are broadcasting non-compliant. Unless you restore certified clearance holders within the hour, your operational privileges will be subject to immediate suspension. Ethan tried to talk, tried to ask questions, but it was too late for answers. Too late for excuses wrapped in buzzwords. He called legal. He called HR. He even tried to log back into Claire's credential portal. But the access was gone. Not expired. Nullified. He tried a password reset. No user found. He called the Federal Aviation Credentialing Desk and got transferred 3 times before someone finally said the sentence that made his world tilt sideways. Claire Thompson voluntarily relinquished her authority. Reinstatement requires full recertification. Average time? 4 to 6 weeks. Ethan hung up. Slowly. As if letting go of the phone too fast might trigger something worse. Across the airport, more alerts popped up. Contracted vendors began to panic. A supplier for high-security gate components froze all deliveries. An analytics firm suspended data transfers. And one of their biggest contractors, Aeropathen, announced they were temporarily suspending collaboration due to compliance ambiguity. Word was spreading. Inside the ops command, a junior controller leaned toward her manager and whispered, "Is this what a systems collapse looks like?" Nobody answered. Because by 3 p.m., it was no longer internal. Local news stations were picking up the delays. A national watchdog account on Twitter posted screenshots of the revoked FAA cert. Someone had leaked it. Compliance crisis started trending. And somewhere, thousands of passengers were looking up at terminals filled with red-lettered words. Delayed. On hold. Cancelled. By 4:12 p.m., the FAA issued a formal inquiry. By 5 p.m., every major airline had flagged the Denver hub as operationally unstable. And verse. That night, 3 executives met behind closed doors. The words, class action, breach of contract, and federal investigation were tossed around like confetti at a funeral. And still, somewhere across the city, Claire was sitting in her apartment, drinking coffee, watching the sun go down over the Rockies. Because while everyone else was chasing clearance, she had already cleared herself from the wreckage. It was the kind of silence you could feel in your molars. Wednesday morning. 8:37 a.m. The executive floor at Denver International wasn't humming with the usual low buzz of power. No banter, no clinking mugs. Just the sound of hard shoes on polished concrete and the faint, almost embarrassing, click of a retractable pen being clicked one too many times. Gregory T. Winslow had just walked in. CEO. Sun-kissed. Suit tailored so sharp it looked like it could cut open the room. Fresh off a strategic offsite in Monaco, radiating wealth and confidence like sunscreen. He strolled in, nodded once, and said, "Morning, folks. Hope y'all didn't burn the place down while I was gone." Nobody laughed. By the time he reached the operations room, he had already read 4 flagged emails, all marked urgent, all about license revocations, vendor lockouts, and system failures. He expected turbulence. He walked into a plane crash. Operations was frozen. Compliance looked gray in the face. Legal was clutching folders like life rafts. And Ethan? Ethan looked like he had just Googled how to undo a nuclear detonation. Gregory didn't sit. He just looked around and asked one question. Who's handling this? The room answered in unison without words. All heads turned toward Ethan. Gregory stepped forward, pulled up the termination record on the room's central monitor. He scrolled, then scrolled again, then again. Silence stretched. "You fired the license holder," he said softly. Ethan opened his mouth, closed it. "You fired the one person with sole federal clearance authority across all operational verticals." A young legal associate cleared her throat. "We thought we could transfer her permissions, just update the contact info." Gregory laughed, but not a warm laugh. The kind of laugh a father gives when he finds out his kid traded the family car for Pokemon cards. "It's a federal license," he said, "not a Gmail password." He turned to HR. "Did anyone flag this? Did no one think to ask what would happen if we cut out the literal spine of our compliance system?" The HR manager blinked. "We followed standard offboarding procedure." "Did you read her contract?" Dead silence. Then someone from audit spoke. "She had a clause. Section 11. C. It auto-triggers full revocation unless transitioned with her approval." Gregory stared at the screen. Claire's name. Every license. Every system. Every piece of authority. All grayed out. Irreplaceable. "Get her back," he ordered. "We tried," Ethan said weakly. "She's not responding." "Then go to her house. Offer her anything. A raise, a jet, a building. I don't care." "She might not want to come back," Ethan added. Gregory slowly turned to him. "You demoted her to mop inventory," he said. "You erased her credentials. You humiliated her in front of staff. And now she's holding the kill switch on every contract we need to breathe." He paused, leaned in. "You better pray she wants anything from us." And just like that, the truth settled over the room. They hadn't just fired an employee. They had excommunicated the one person who knew the language of the entire system. And now? She wasn't praying. She was watching them burn. 3 weeks later, her name reappeared. Not in a press release. Not in a lawsuit. Not even in a news article. Just one clean LinkedIn update. Claire Thompson, Director of Aviation Systems, North Sky Defense. No hashtags. No fanfare. Just a single line. Grateful to join a team where integrity is not negotiable. Beneath the post, 2 quiet lines from industry insiders sealed the deal. North Sky Defense secures multi-year contracts with Aeropath and Skylance Systems, citing complete compliance continuity as the deciding factor. Those were the crown jewels. 2 contracts worth hundreds of millions. 2 clients the old airport firm had flaunted in every quarterly report. 2 names now. Gone. And no one had to ask why. Because everyone in the industry already knew. Claire didn't just carry her credentials. She carried trust. Her signature wasn't just ink, it was certainty. And in a world of risk, certainty sells itself. Across the city, the old company was still unraveling. Their dashboard never fully turned green again. Compliance appeals were choked in bureaucracy. Some were bounced by federal systems. Others were manually denied, possibly by people who now worked with Claire. Fines were mounting. Vendors were pausing. Contracts were slipping. The office holiday party was canceled due to budgetary reallocation. And Ethan? He was quietly reassigned. New title: Project Support Liaison, Level Due. No desk. No team. Just a temporary login and a swivel chair that squeaked when he breathed. Meanwhile, Claire had her own office now. Glass walls. Polished wood. Her name etched on the door, not printed, engraved. A small espresso machine hummed quietly beside her desk. The chair didn't wobble. The view overlooked the runway, not because she missed the chaos, but because she knew what it meant to tame it. Each morning, she sat down, opened her feeds, and read the alerts like a weatherwoman reading storms she'd already outflown. Ping. Another audit failure across town. Ping. Old vendor contract flagged pending litigation. Ping. Her old company listed strategic restructuring due to legacy system complications. She didn't gloat, didn't screenshot, didn't say a word. She simply sipped her coffee Colombian black with a pinch of cinnamon and leaned back in her chair. Above her monitor, pinned with a cobalt pushpin, was a single yellow sticky note. No emoji. No signature. Just 5 words written in neat, block letters. In case they ever forget. ISO. And beneath it, I was the system. There's a kind of irony in how the world demands change. We praise innovation. We cheer for disruption. We idolize the loud, the fast, the shiny. But in the rush to chase what's next, we often forget what's holding everything together. That's the thing about foundations. They don't speak. They don't sparkle. They don't trend. They just stay. Quiet. Constant. Reliably. Until someone, somewhere, decides they're in the way. End of 41. Claire Thompson was never the loudest voice in the room. She didn't write mission statements or host weekly pep talks. She didn't have a brand. She had a backbone. And a quiet vow she made to herself long ago. If I'm going to build something, it's going to last even if no one sees my name on it. But the thing about silent strength is, people forget it's there. Until it isn't. Ethan Doyle didn't destroy the airport system because he was evil. He destroyed it because he didn't understand it. He mistook elegance for simplicity. He assumed that legacy meant outdated. And in doing so, he cut out the woman who had spent 17 years keeping the gears from grinding into fire. This wasn't just a cautionary tale about corporate power struggles. It wasn't just about paperwork or protocol. It was about something deeper. A lesson that echoes beyond terminals and towers. Progress without respect becomes destruction in a prettier outfit. There is a difference between updating a system and tearing it out because you don't understand what it does. And in that difference lies the fate of everything you claim to improve. Claire didn't win because she fought back. She won because she didn't need to. She had already done the work. She had already written her name into the structure. They couldn't erase her, not really. Because they were still using blueprints she built with her bare hands. And when the dust settled, she didn't come back. Because true strength doesn't return to burned buildings just to prove it was fireproof. It walks away, quietly, calmly, certain of what it gave and what it's no longer obligated to fix. So the next time someone praises efficiency over wisdom, or talks about streamlining without listening to the people who kept things running before the buzzwords arrived, remember this: innovation matters, but so does memory, and those who forget the foundation eventually learn the cost of collapse.